Welcome to the Everyday Miracles podcast, where real life stories of hope and inspiration are shared. Every day, miracles are happening all around us, yet we rarely hear anything about them. Why is that? I'm Julie Hedenborg, and I've committed my time and energy to bring these stories to you, including some of my own personal experiences. My hope is that you'll be impacted the same way that I was. Join me in my journey to inspire change in a world that so desperately needs it. Hey, welcome back. This is Julie Hedenborg with Everyday Miracles podcast. And today I am super thrilled to show you my guests. I have Julie Kemp here to my right and Landon Whitley. This is a complete honor for me to be able to present this testimony from both of these people today. It's a little ironic that they actually live a few miles from my house. Their testimony has been basically all over the world. I'm not going to begin to list all the different places that they've shared their story, but I know they've been on Dr. Oz, the 700 Club, Inspiration Ministries Network, and some of those, if I can tag them onto the blog, I can do that if people want to go back and look at those. But today's topic is about grief, which is a huge thing that people are dealing with right now. It's also involving a near-death experience, more than one actually. There was a tragic accident that we're going to hear about from Julie that was many years back. Landon was a child, and he actually died 3 times and had a heaven experience, more than one, right? And so we're going to hear about all those details. So Julie, she is a grief share counselor. And I think it's so beautiful how something so tragic and devastating that happened to you, which I'm so sorry that has happened, but the way that you have taken that experience and used it to become a ministry where you're blessing and serving other people is beyond inspiring. Yeah, so I'm so happy that you're here today. And
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and I have not had 3 people on the camera at once, so we're really tight in here. So, but Julie, if you can just share a little bit, just go back to the day when things happened.
Okay.
Started.
Okay. It was a normal Sunday morning, and we went to church, and we were on our way home from church. We were almost home when we were T-boned at an intersection by an ambulance. And at the intersection, when we were T-boned, my husband was driving. I was in the passenger seat, and Landon was sitting behind his dad. Mm-hmm. And the impact was so strong, and it hit my husband's side, that when the rescuers got there, they were working on him, but he died on his way to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So he never made it to the hospital. And when they were working on me, they were trying to get me out of the car. I had injuries. I had a collapsed lung and crushed ribs and broken arm. And so they were working on me. And when they were getting me out of the car is when they found a child's shoe. And when they found Landon's shoe is when it deepened the search to find his body. But because of the impact that pushed my husband over Landon, they couldn't see him.
Oh, and how old was he?
He was 8 years old at the time, almost 9.
Mm-hmm.
And so that deepened the search, and they had to go in through the trunk to get to Landon, take everything out. And so when they got him out of the trunk, he was not breathing.
And you were not aware of this because were you already taken to the hospital when they pulled him out?
No, I was there. I did not see them bring him out. They had me behind a ambulance or, a fire truck, because all of the paramedics and everyone came to the scene. And so they had a lady there. I felt like she was just trying to keep me distracted. She was asking me insurance questions and what church did we just go to, and so I don't know if she was just seeing if I was coherent or but she was keeping me away from the accident when they were pulling Landon out and working on him.
Okay. At what point did you realize that your husband had passed?
I did not know that he passed. He was a big man, healthy. He wanted that day, he was going to go put some deer corn out and go deer hunting. And he played ball. And, so he was a big, healthy man. And I thought he was okay because, they were working on the two of us and they called Carolina's Medical Center and they had a chopper come get us. And while Landon and I were being airlifted, they told me that they were taking Andy to the local hospital by ambulance. Mm-hmm. And I assumed and I was thinking that he was okay because if he would have been hurt worse, that he would have been in the chopper with us.
Okay.
And so I did not know at the time that, that he had passed when all that was going on. And so while Landon and I were being airlifted, we were together and, they had the crew there. And that's when he died the second time on our way to Carolina's Medical Center. And they worked really quick to bring him back fast. And so they rushed us to Carolina's Medical Center and they took him back to the intensive care neurotrauma unit and me to the emergency room. And when he was back there is when he died the third time, and what they think was the longest time because they had such a hard time bringing him back. Mm-hmm. And so that's when he died the third time.
And what was his prognosis at this point? What did they tell you?
They were not giving me any hope at all. He had so much brain injury. His face was just crushed in. And they told me that if he lived, which did not look good, but that if he lived, that he would be like an 8-year-old baby, not knowing how to walk or talk or eat. And I was just praying as hard as I could to let him live. That was okay. I just wanted him to live. I would take anything just to have him alive. And I was having surgeries myself, and I kept waking up in a panic, asking for my husband and asking for Landon. So my family had to finally tell me that Andy didn't make it. And so I was having panic attacks, and so they were keeping me medicated. And so I was just really in a panic to see Landon and just to touch him and, just to make sure that he was okay. And so I was able to go up and visit him, but I had to check myself out of the hospital. I had to sign all of the against medical advisement forms to leave because, I was, still suffering with a lot of injuries. And they thought that, I would have problems with my lungs. But I had to check myself out so that I could attend my husband's funeral.
Oh my goodness. So at that point, you're just coming home from church.
Mm-hmm.
Your family is your son and your husband. You didn't have any other siblings. Or siblings, children. This was your whole world.
Right.
So at that point, when did he get better? Like when and how were you dealing with this? So much to deal with at once.
It was like I was having an out-of-body experience. I knew what was happening, and I just kept thinking that when I wake up, the nightmare would be over. That this is just a nightmare. And I remember they were wheeling me down for the funeral in a wheelchair. And, unfortunately, you're all on the front row at this. And I heard the preacher talking. I knew, what was happening. But I was praying so hard, for Landon to live. And then I was looking at the casket and I was fussing at God. It's like, where were you? We were on our way home from church. And so I was just struggling, fussing at God and praying to God, fussing that I'm here and then praying for Landon to live. And I just kept worrying that, I would make it back to the hospital in time and never have to bury Landon, right after that. And so I was going through the whole funeral process. And when I went back to make sure that Landon was still alive, he stayed in a coma for 19 days. And there was absolutely nothing. He was doing nothing. There was no reaction to anything. They weren't seeing any signs, good or bad, absolutely nothing. And they had him plugged up to all kinds of machines. And so they finally scheduled surgery because of the swelling was so bad on the brain. And so they opened him up from ear to ear, and they took the back part of his skull out to rebuild his nose. And they put 23 metal plates across his forehead for the damage that had been done there. And it was just a wait and see, and they weren't giving me any hope. It was just to wait and see. And so I kept staring at him while he was in ICU. I just kept, he has beautiful blue eyes. And so I just kept praying that, would I ever see his beautiful blue eyes open? So I kept just staring for a blink or something. And I was in the room by myself with him when I knew that he was coming back to me. There was been a few things where he would twitch or jerk or do something that made me think that, oh, he's moving, but, they told me that was just a reaction. But before our accident, Landon had a very annoying habit, and he's doing it for you now.
Yeah.
He would always pop his knuckles, and it just drove me crazy. And so he popped his knuckles 24/7. But while he was coming out of his coma, the very first thing that he did was pop his knuckles.
Oh, wow, which is not an involuntary thing.
Right, exactly. And so I just promised God right then, I'll never fuss at him again to please let him keep popping his knuckles. And
she made the mistake of telling me
I know,
that.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was our first sign that he was coming out of the coma.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long before he coming back to
it? All happened just so fast after that. While he was in the coma, they were having a wheelchair made specially for him, thinking that he was never going to walk again. And so they had this wheelchair for him, and but they worked fast. And I personally was struggling with, I had my first, I thought a heart attack, but it was just worst blown panic attack when they were unplugging him to move him to rehab, because I knew all those machines was saving his life. And then they were, moving him. And so, but he was amazing with his recovery. And he did everything that they said he would never be able to do. And I pushed him. He had to go to a physical therapy appointment. And he was so mad that they were putting him in that wheelchair. And he was so angry. And so after his physical therapy appointment, he pushed it. And so we were just wobbling. I was trying to hang on to him. My arm was in a cast, but he refused to get back in that wheelchair, and he never got in it again.
Wow. So it went quickly.
It went very quickly, yes.
So he's a walking miracle.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's amazing. Now, you're still going through this grief process. At what point, you're having to help him. Like, what was that like for you and in your faith? How did that play a role? Like, how were you with God through all of that?
Well, when, while Landon was in the coma and going through his rehab and stuff, I never dealt with my grief. I buried it because the only thing that mattered was him living. And so, it was just like at the funeral. I don't understand, God. Why did you allow this to happen? I was reminding him of all the things that we were doing right, and I just finished reading a book by Billy Graham all about angels and how they worked in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and even today. And I didn't understand why God didn't send an angel, and so I was having all these arguments with God in my head. I never verbalized them
Mhm.
because I felt like I would be condemned for sharing these things as a Christian, arguing with
Mhm.
God. And so I buried my grief so that I could concentrate on Landon and get him. But I had an amazing team around me of friends that were praying for me and, on my behalf, and they knew the struggles and until I could get there.
Yeah. So I have a lot of people that have reached out to me from my YouTube channel that are in a situation right now where it's raw and it's fresh and they're just sustaining moment to moment. So if you, looking back on this, if you could talk to them, like what kinds of things can you say for them? Like how do you handle that first year? How do you get through those moments soon after? Like you said, obviously support of friends.
Right. It is okay to not understand. It's okay to ask God why. I was listening to a sermon one time, and we've all heard this, but it really made an impact on my healing. Is when Jesus was hanging on the cross, he, asked himself, my God, why have you forsaken me? And because Jesus asked why, not that I'm Jesus in any way, but I knew that it was okay for me to ask why. And so, whatever questions you're struggling with, find the answers. There was no grief share support group for me. I did not get counseling. I didn't reach out to a pastor or for help. I tried to do it on my own and I internalized it. And you can never get through grief if you don't work through all those emotions. You just carry it deeper and you carry it longer. It's painful to go through the holidays. You don't want to go through the holidays. At Thanksgiving, you're not feeling thankful when everybody's listing all their reasons to be thankful, but you're not. But it took me a few years later, and I sent a thank you note to Landon's brain surgeon for being on call. It's like there are things to be thankful for, even though you don't feel like it, And so I was looking at what I didn't have instead of what I did have. And so that was, a healing for me to write a letter and be thankful for something. So to look for the things that you do have.
That's great. That's great. So you're healing. At what point are you realizing that he's had an experience? I guess maybe we can just ask you to shift into that. How the experiences that you had, each three.
My first, second, third heavenly experience.
Yes.
I remember my first experience, I was instantly reunited with my dad. And me, him, his friend Olin, and Olin's son. Olin had just passed away less than a month before in a car accident, and his son had passed away years before on a four-wheeler. We were all standing in a square, not saying a word to each other, but just the mere fact that I knew that I was surrounded by them, I felt at peace. I knew people. And then I remember it being so bright and colorful. Words can't describe it. And then on my second trip, I remember seeing my mom's first two miscarriages that I had never known anything about. She had a boy and a girl before me, and I had never known anything about them until I'd met them.
How did you know they were your siblings?
I don't remember them saying anything to me. I don't remember me saying anything to them. But I guess in heaven, you just know your own, I guess. And then that's what really triggered my mom. Let her know that like I'm not overfilled on medication. I'm not dreaming. Like whenever I said that, she was like, there was nobody in the hospital at that time talking about her miscarriages, so it's not like I'd overheard it. And so that, and then my third time, I was able to meet Jesus, and he wanted me to come back and tell others about him, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Wow. Okay, you're not getting away with just that. We gotta have some more detail. Okay, Jesus.
Right.
What please, any detail, like what was the feeling? What did you see? Did you hear? Did he speak to your heart? Like,
He looked like he was about 6 foot tall. That's by comparing him to my dad's height. He looked like he had long brown hair, facial hair, and head hair. He was wearing a white crystal sparklish robe. Um, and that's all I remember. It was very quick. And then, like she had said, the third time was the longest time. I always tell people, well, you can only argue with the big man for so long. So,
so that's all he said to you. He
yeah.
said you're to go back and you're to
tell others
share.
about him.
Wow. How did you feel in his presence?
I guess I must have enjoyed it since that was my longest time being gone. I guess I didn't want to come back, but at the same time, I know that there are hearts and there are people out there that need to be directed towards him and helped through many walks in life.
Okay, obviously you still have lost your father,
Right.
but then you get to see him in heaven. Like, you still are grieving that loss, but do you feel like this was a gift to you? Like Jesus maybe allowed you to see that to give you a little bit more peace that your dad was in heaven?
Maybe. I remember the doctor telling her that if she didn't tell me where my dad was at, then they were going to. And she was asking me, well, Landon, do you know where your dad's at? Because wondering if I thought he was working or what. And I said, I know where he's at. He's in heaven. And she was like, how do you know that? I was like, I just saw him. And then piece by piece, a little time after a little time, it all just started coming together.
Wow. And you knew you were in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've read about, in the book Imagine Heaven, I'm not getting paid to share this, but I just happen to love that book. I mean, the Bible is always our source.
Right.
But in Imagine Heaven, this man has studied thousands of these experiences, and he says 1 in 25 people have a near-death experience, and not all of them talk about it, especially the negative ones. But so many of them have shared that they were told to come back and share this testimony. Now, with the increase that we're seeing in all of these experiences, do you feel that God could be allowing this or providing this to give people hope? Or how do you feel about when you read other people's experiences or people challenge you about yours?
I feel very thankful. I feel very blessed on the fact of knowing that I'm able to sharing. Whenever I speak about it, I tell people, I was like, it's not anything I have faith in. It's not anything I'm hoping to one day see. It's something that I have seen.
Yeah.
So I know it's there. It's not like I'm challenging myself on my amount of faith or my amount of want or anything else. It's something that I know. And it's like, I'm just sharing with you what little bit of heaven I was able to see and very little I was able to see. And I'm very happy and blessed in being able to do that.
Does the memory kind of fade, or is it just
yeah.
Okay. Amazing. There's several things more that I want to talk about. For one, those of you that are dealing with grief, Miss Julie Kemp here has written a couple books, and one that I love too. This one is amazing. Faith Has Its Reasons. I'm going to list all the links for these. This is a book that she's written to help people that are going through grief. And then there's another one here. And this one is for children, and I love this. I used to work with kids a lot in the hospital, and they're just so beautiful and pure and innocent, and they think a little differently. They're a little more very literal thinkers. Right. And this beautiful book, if you know of a child that has lost a loved one, this is a great resource. And I'm going to have the link here online, and it's also in Espanol. So I love that too. I took care of a lot of Spanish patients. So this is just something I wanted to share here while we're having this time. I think it's beautiful that in all this tragic loss that you had, and then a miracle, and then another miracle in your experience, you're able to birth this ministry where you're speaking out to so many people that are needing comfort right now and need to know that God is real. Another thing I thought was really interesting about your story, you had mentioned that 16 years later, if you could just lean in and share something that was put on your heart.
Okay. I was getting ready for work. This was a Thursday morning, and I was listening to a teaching on the TV while I was getting ready. And they were talking about how no one knows when Jesus is going to come back. You know, they had the Y2K, and everybody tries to predict, but none of us know when. But they put a spin on it, and they said, but if you did know, that was Thursday, and they said, if you did know Sunday that Jesus was going to come back, what do you need to do? And as soon as that question was asked, it's like my heart just exploded. And I was like, no, surely not. You know, God, no, you know, I've been good. You don't want me to do this. And, you know, I had overcome so much through my grief and dealing with Landon. And so I knew that I heard wrong.
And what did you hear?
But Jesus was telling me that I needed to reach out to the driver of the ambulance that hit us. And I did not want to do it, but God was speaking to me so strongly that I did follow through. And before I did, I reached out to my pastor, and I said, I feel like I need to do this. I don't want to do this, and I felt a part of me would be betraying my husband if I was offering forgiveness to this man, and so my pastor was amazing. He was like, Andy's in heaven. He's happy. He wants you to be happy. You need to obey what Jesus is laying on your heart. And so we did arrange to meet the driver of the ambulance. And it was very awkward. It was very uncomfortable for us and for him. And so we were talking, and he just kept staring at Landon. And, the whole time, he would make eye contact and then look away, and he just kept staring at Landon. And he finally shared with us that the reason he was staring is because for 16 years, he woke up every morning. He had nightmares. And when he woke up, he saw that dead little 8-year-old that they pulled out of the trunk. And I did not know this, but he told me that Landon died with his eyes open. And so he just kept staring because he says, I hope when I wake up in the morning that this is the face I'll see. And so I just knew then that it wasn't about me. It was, to help him get on with his life. He had struggled with a lot of his why questions. There were different why questions than what I struggled with, because he told us he was trained to save lives and not take lives. And so we did meet with him in heaven. But I found this note from him that he had written 2 weeks before our accident. And I found it very important for the ambulance driver to know. So Landon's going to share that.
Yes.
My dad had wrote, before I received eternal life, I was always worried. Where would I go when I die? I had always thought and hoped that I would go to heaven, but I just did not know. My younger brother was killed in a car accident when he was 15 years old. That would have made me about 21. After that happened, I was devastated and just knew that this could happen to me or anyone. I started wondering, where would I go if this would happen to me? I then became afraid of death. I received eternal life, and it took such a load off of me and gave me such a great feeling of security. Now that I have eternal life, I no longer have the worry or fear of dying because I know that I will go to heaven when I die. God has given me complete peace of knowing that I have eternal life. It is so much easier going through life without worry or fear of dying because I know for sure that God has given me eternal life.
Beautiful. And to hear you, a person who is not supposed to survive, and a person who is not supposed to have brain function or walk ever again, to see and hear you reading that actually gets me choked up. So thank you very much. Another thing I neglected to mention now that I'm looking at this book, if you could also share this is a really neat point too. Back to the book for the children, it's called Highway to Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a little on that?
Sure. When Landon's dad and I were trying to come up with a name for him, we didn't agree on anything. There was nothing that, we liked, or how it is sometimes someone, or, so we were trying to think of a family name, and we just really struggled to find a name for him. And back for the fast forward DVR days, we'd have to listen to the watch the screen at the end of each show, with the actors and producers, directors, or whatever. And at the time, I was very pregnant, and I saw Michael Landon's name come up, and I just fell in love with the name Landon. And at that time, the show that I was watching was Highway to Heaven. And so, I told my husband, and we were thrilled to have that name. But I had no idea when I was watching that show in 1988 that Landon would have his own Highway to Heaven, but that's how he got his name.
Amazing. I love that. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing this with me. I know do you ever get tired of telling this story? I mean, it's amazing. It's because you've told it so many times. Just to see Jesus, like I just want to, serious. It's like amazing. Okay. And seriously though, we have a lot of people watching. I've had a lot of people that are skeptical. A lot of people that are just loving these testimonies and being so blessed, and they're so grateful for the time that we're doing this. If you had one takeaway message, each of you, just to lean forward and share any parting thoughts that you would give them from this whole experience.
If you're on a grief journey and you're struggling, you will find joy again. It will come. Your mourning will turn to joy. You will forever love and miss your loved one. That will never go away. The big, heavy place in your heart that you just feel like a hole is there because your loved one's not in your life. It's going to be there because they're such a big part of your life, but it will eventually be filled with memories, happy memories. And when you see reminders of them, you'll just be able to look back and reflect and smile and be thankful for the years that you did have with them. And you will know that you'll be reunited one day.
What I'd like to say is, no matter what your fears, no matter what your doubts, no matter what your feelings are, just always know that there is a God, there are angels, there is a heaven, and it is waiting for you for whenever your time comes. So just always keep your faith alive and always know that Jesus is real.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, thank you.
So honored. So honored. In my backyard. I had this in my backyard. Thank you so much for listening. And I will attach all of these resources on the blog. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just appreciate it so much. And if you have a miracle that you would like to share, please share it with me at everydaymiraclespodcast.com. Thank you very much.